Brought to you by Penguin.
The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth. Read by David Rintoul. Part 1. Anatomy of a Plot. Chapter 1. It is cold at 6:40 in the morning of a March day in Paris, and seems even colder when a man is about to be executed by firing squad. At that hour, on March the 11th, 1963, in the main courtyard of the Fort d'Ivry, a French Air Force colonel stood before a stake driven into the chilly gravel as his hands were bound behind the post, and stared, with slowly diminishing disbelief, at the squad of soldiers facing him 20 meters away. A foot scuffed the grit, a tiny release from tension, as the blindfold was wrapped around the eyes of Lieutenant Colonel Jean-Marie Bastien-Thierry, blotting out the light for the last time. The mumbling of the priest was a helpless counterpoint to the crackling of 20 rifle bolts as the soldiers charged and cocked their carbines. Beyond the walls, a Berlier truck blared for a passage as some smaller vehicle crossed its path towards the center of the city. The sound died away, masking the "take your aim" order from the officer in charge of the squad. The crash of rifle fire, when it came, caused no ripple on the surface of the waking city other than to send a flutter of pigeons skywards for a few moments. The single whack, seconds later, of the coup de grâce was lost in the rising din of traffic from beyond the walls. The death of the officer, leader of a gang of secret army organization killers who had sought to shoot the President of France, was to have been an end to further attempts on the President's life. By a quirk of fate, it marked a beginning. And to explain why, it must first be necessary to explain why a riddled body came to hang from its ropes in the courtyard of the military prison outside Paris on that March morning. The sun had dropped at last behind the palace wall, and long shadows rippled across the courtyard, bringing a welcome relief. Even at 7 in the evening of the hottest day of the year, the temperature was still 23 degrees centigrade. Across the sweltering city, the Parisians piled querulous wives and yelling children into cars and trains to leave for the weekend in the country. It was August the 22nd, 1962, the day a few men waiting beyond the city boundaries had decided that the President, General Charles de Gaulle, should die. While the city's population prepared to flee the heat for the relative cool of the rivers and beaches, the cabinet meeting behind the ornate facade of the Élysée Palace continued. Across the tan gravel of the front courtyard, now cooling in welcome shadow, 16 black Citroën DS saloons were drawn up nose to tail, forming a circle round 3/4 of the area. The drivers, lurking in the deepest shade close to the west wall where the shadows had arrived first, exchanged the inconsequential banter of those who spend most of their working days waiting on their master's whims. There was more desultory grumbling at the unusual length of the cabinet's deliberations until, a moment before 7:30, a chained and bemedalled usher appeared behind the plate-glass doors at the top of the 6 steps of the palace and gestured towards the guards. Among the drivers, half-smoked Gaulois were dropped and ground into the gravel. The security men and guards stiffened in their boxes beside the front gate, and the massive iron grilles were swung open. The chauffeurs were at the wheels of their limousines when the first group of ministers appeared behind the plate glass. The usher opened the doors, and the members of the cabinet straggled down the steps, exchanging a few last-minute pleasantries for a restful weekend. In order of precedence, the saloons eased up to the base of the steps. The usher opened the rear door with a bow, and ministers climbed into their respective cars and were driven away past the salutes of the Garde Républicaine and out into the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. Within 10 minutes, they were gone. 2 long black DS-19 Citroëns remained in the yard, and each slowly cruised to the base of the steps. The first, flying the pennant of the President of the French Republic, was driven by Francis Marou, a police driver from the training and headquarters camp of the Gendarmerie Nationale at Satory. His silent temperament had kept him apart from the joking of...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?